Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dionysios, and together with Orlando today, we are going to talk about sex trafficking. And there are many things one can ask about sex trafficking, but I would like to know how much of it is real, how much of it is made up, and every now and then we will hear rumors about occult and sex trafficking. Do you have any knowledge about this kind of stuff?
I got too much. Let me start off by saying, does sex trafficking happen? Yes. Is it the type of thing you see in the movies? No. I've had how many people, especially when I was in the States, when their daughters, etc., visiting Europe for a holiday, whatever, saying, okay, is there a threat for my daughter being kidnapped? Well, not really.
Like in the movies?
Like in the movies. Don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. Unless they go out and do something stupid. I'd say there's more chance of a tourist visiting Europe and getting roofied, getting date raped, etc., etc. That's a threat. Getting kidnapped, not really. How a lot of these kidnapping gangs work, and it makes me laugh for the sex trafficking, the scams still work, where they advertise in their own countries for girls to get jobs, waitress jobs, etc., etc., in other places. And then when the girls show up, they're drugged, raped, and put into prostitution.
Okay.
Now, that happens, but it's generally not Westerners. It's generally girls from poor countries. And this is one of the reasons they use girls from poor countries. Generally, nobody cares about them. The police aren't going to do any response. Even if they're reported missing, nobody cares. But saying that, even if, let's say, an American girl came to Europe, American guy came to Europe, and they disappeared, a teenager, early 20s. You want to think about now how you'd report that kid missing. Well, you go to your local police, you go to the FBI. What's the FBI going to do? They're just going to think the kid's all partying, right? Especially if they're young. They can contact the local police in that area, and generally the local police, we don't care, they're off partying. If there's no evidence of a crime, generally there's going to be no investigation. So they've disappeared.
For how long? Because if it ends days, weeks, at some point, it's not partying anymore. Someone should pay attention.
What evidence is there of a crime? That person could have just gone off.
Missing. At least that. They're looking for a missing person. If it is 3 days, 4 days, 5 days,
yeah,
5
who's
weeks.
going to look? The police have got enough
on their
plate to worry about somebody. Is there a crime? The person disappeared. They could be off on. They could have ran away with a boyfriend, girlfriend. They could have eloped. They could be on a drug trip somewhere.
Okay.
They're stoned out their minds. They're drunk. They're partying. Who knows? Unless there's evidence of a crime, generally nothing's investigated until a body turns up or something, or the person's arrested.
Okay.
But the same people disappear all the time. Nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
So again, thinking that the police will do an in-depth investigation if somebody disappears is crazy.
Okay.
Yeah. So does sex trafficking happen? Yes, it does happen. This is where I get into trouble with a few things with people. When I've heard this in a lot of places. Generally, a lot of the girls that's been trafficked, and I know this for a fact, throughout the Caribbean, Latin America, I'm sure it's the same in Europe. A lot of the girls that's been trafficked for sex work are already sex workers.
Okay.
And I've read some reports, one that comes to mind, a girl that was trafficked into UAE. Okay, that girl had to go through how many borders before she went to UAE? I think she came out of one country into Georgia, Georgia to Turkey, Turkey to UAE. Okay, she had to go through how many immigration checks, how many customs posts. She could have said, hello, I've got a problem. Help me. But she didn't. In the Caribbean, a lot of the girls want to be trafficked, and I've heard how many people say, cops, they do one raid, deport the girls back to their own countries, or take them back. A couple of months later, they're back again. Why? They can make more money in other countries than they can in their own country. A sex worker in Moldova is not going to be earning as much money as a sex worker in Dubai. That's a fact.
For sure.
In the US, what usually happens is when a sex worker, a foreign sex worker that's in the country illegally, is arrested by the cops or found out, and they're generally involved in other crimes as well, then they'll cry, I'm a victim of a crime. You know why?
They get some special status treatment or whatever?
They can get a green card. so they can get their residency in US because they've been involved in a crime, etc., exploited.
As a victim,
As a victim. So this is where a lot of the sex workers, when they're arrested in US, they'll say, okay, we've been trafficked. Why? Because then they can get residency status.
Okay.
In the meantime, if they're not caught, they make a lot more money in the US than they do in other places. Now, that's one side of it. The other side of it is where you get some girls that are groomed, etc. This usually happens to the underage girls or girls that happen to get caught up in the drug scene, etc. That's completely different in my books. If that's been identified, that does happen. You know what? The people behind that, the grooming gangs, the pedophiles, etc. I think I'll say this from a US perspective because I know you don't have the death sentence in Europe, but in certain US states, I think lethal injection's too nice for such people. If people are behind the trafficking of children for sexual purposes, etc., then you know what? I think a firing squad's too nice. I think a kilogram hammer from the toes up would work better. But again, you're seeing it now in the US. There's how many unaccompanied children being taken across the border, and people have cried about when Trump was in, he's separating the kids from their parents. Okay, prove those are actually the kids' parents.
Yes.
How do you know that kid has not been kidnapped somewhere and been trafficked into the US to be sold for sexual purposes, for their organs, etc.
Yeah, we've seen that also in other parts of the world. Here in Europe, with immigrants coming supposedly with their wife and kids, and there were instances where it was not their kid, it was not their wife at all.
The thing is with Europe, how many undocumented people are in Europe? Nobody knows. How many criminals? How many terrorists? But also from children, how does anybody know who these children are? Okay, this is another question. How many of these children have disappeared? Nobody knows because they're undocumented. They've come in from Turkey into Greece, into other countries, and they've just been trafficked.
And then we might be talking about trafficking, harvesting of organs, all this, you know.
You mentioned the occult before, and the occult is involved in this. They reckon, I forget where they say one of the main places for the occult is out there. I think it's Turin in Italy. There's big issues there. But how many children have apparently been disappeared to be used in occult ceremonies, etc. That stuff is out there. It is real. It does happen. One thing as well with the African traffickers is how many cases the African traffickers, mainly Nigerians, of course. I've lived in Nigeria. I spent time in Nigeria. I got very good Nigerian friends. I just bash the Nigerians because you deserve it. But there's how many Nigerian traffickers that use magic, black magic rituals, etc., to intimidate their victims into
Submission.
Once they're trafficked, they're using magic, threats of magic, which is part of their culture, threats of magic to keep the girls working, etc., etc. So the occult is involved in a lot of the African organized crime, especially West African organized crime. But the sex trafficking, it's complicated. It's been out there for a long time. People have been doing this stuff forever. Sex slaves have been around forever. It's a very dirty business. I've heard recently, I know someone that's actively working, trying to combat this stuff in Ukraine at the moment. And there's big issues with sex trafficking there. Girls being taken advantage of. Generally, the girls need help and they end up being sex slaves. But you know what? In some ways, it's part of human nature. It's what people do. To me, humans are not the best species on the planet. But there's not much. As I said in other videos, all problems can be solved if people want to solve them. The trouble is, these days, there's that many people making money off other people's problems, be it the unscrupulous NGOs, and I know NGOs that's actually trying to do good, but they're the ones that tend not to get the big bucks in funding because they're not well connected, and they're actually doing their job. They're just not kissing other people's ass for donations. Be it NGOs, be it government agencies, there's a lot of people making money from this problem, and in some ways they don't want the problem to disappear, because when the problem disappears, they're losing money. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Orlando. Thank you, the viewers, for your time. And we would like to know what you think about what we have discussed on the comment section below. Once again, that's all for tonight.